Right. Yeah.
Welcome. My name is Tabitha Vilmet. I'm an Aloha High School student right now, and recently I was able to meet Jordan Thierry, who is also an Aloha alum, and I'm able to ask him some questions regarding how he went about making the Black Fatherhood Project.
Let's do it. Let's do it. Thanks for coming, Tabitha.
So Jordan, how does this film really speak to you personally?
Oh, I mean, this film has been my life for the last 7 years. You know, so I started when I was 23 years old, and now I'm 30. So it speaks to me personally in a whole variety of ways. First, when you look at just the content of the film, of course, part of my life story is in there. So, you know, it speaks from the perspective of a young man who had a father, who had a black father present, and how that was sort of a rare experience, right? And so it speaks to me in that way. But then the product itself speaks to me in probably a much more powerful way, because it is the creation of, you know, it's a creation of something that came from my heart, something that came from my own life experience, and something that has now just been a part of my coming into adulthood. You know, I've worked on it almost throughout all of my 20s, and so the experience of learning from elders, from having conversations with people from all walks of life around fatherhood, and then the experience of trying to take all of that information, all those conversations, all those insights, and squeeze them into, you know, an hour and 15 minutes. You have to develop a broad skill set to be able to do that. And to me, that's sort of now how I define my skill set is part storytelling, you know, part writing, part research, and then part creative, if you will. Mm-hmm. So those are the sort of ways that the film speaks to me.
Okay. So this is obviously a huge part of your life, but how long did you really know that you were interested in this project?
You know, in high school, I that's when I really started to notice the trend of different African American families, and, you know, looking at youth and the different outcomes that my friends and my family members were having in life, sort of, you know, whether or not they were being successful or reaching their goals. And I started to notice that one of the, you know, common factors in the success or in the failure, if you will, was, you know, having a father present, having a positive male role model around to play the father figure role. And, you know, I think that it kind of struck me one day, you know, late high school, early college, that, man, this fatherhood thing is a big thing for the African American community, and I think it attributes to a lot of our failure and our success. But I started noticing it, you know, in high school, really, but really after I got to college, started doing a little bit more research, a little bit more reading, and started to meet people from other parts of the country. It really kind of struck a chord with me, and I knew that it was something important.
What made you choose to use film as your medium?
I chose film as my medium because, for me personally, it's always what has sort of moved me. You know, it sort of always invoked some kind of emotional response. And I grew up watching a lot of Spike Lee movies, and I wanted to be like Spike Lee. And the reason I liked Spike Lee movies so much was, obviously he's a great filmmaker, but really also he was one of the only people making films about the Black experience. And so that was like, I clung to that, right? So I wanted to make, you know, movies myself, and I didn't really know anything about film, but I do remember in about 8th grade, my parents bought a camcorder. They never really used it. I ended up using it a lot, and I started to make my own little movies and use my little brother and his friends as like my actors. And you know, I didn't have any kind of editing software, so basically I had to just get the shot that I wanted, and if I didn't want it, if it didn't work, I had to rewind and record over, you know, where the scene was supposed to start on the tape, and I had to shoot in order of the storyline, right? Mm-hmm. So I just remember that experience, but I put a lot of effort into it, and I actually did a lot of planning and stuff like that. That was, I guess that early on, I was like, this is fun, but I didn't think about it as a career choice or anything serious until, you know, I got into college. But 8th, 9th grade, that's when I first started to get to play with the camcorder, and I guess it kind of stuck with me ever since.
So aside from the camcorder, what other events in your childhood do you feel like really prepared you to address such a big social issue?
Man, I don't know. You know, I think that I have to say just having a strong, loving family. You know, with a big family, a lot of extended family, that's always just been very encouraging and has also been really good about telling us who we are and what our history is, and kind of having that, you know, identity provided for me, I think was critical in being able to make a film like this that touches on so much of the African American historical experience. I think it was good for me to know where my lineage was in that story, in that history, right? I kind of know where at least some of my lineage is in where they fit into that story.
What were the original goals and intentions of the film?
The original goal of the film was, it's supposed to be a short film, 25 minutes. And the basic idea was I wanted to show Black fathers in a positive light. I wanted to counter the stereotype and have a documentary with, you know, positive, good examples of fathers. And that was sort of it, right? That was like the basic premise or from the original concept. And as I started to do that, I interviewed, you know, probably 10 dads over the summer, and the interviews were good, but I wasn't really addressing the heart of the problem, you know, which was why is a negative stereotype there in the first place? Why is that negative reality there in the first place for so many African American families? And I figured, you know, I'm sort of ignoring the elephant in the room by only talking about the positive and not talking about why this negative, why this, you know, problem in the Black community exists. And so I decided to start doing a little bit more historical research, and it kind of grew into what was supposed to be a nice summer project to like a 6-7 year project, and actually covering, you know, a few hundred years plus of history in a very short period of time. But it grew into a feature-length film, and it's more than I ever imagined it would be. And so I'm thankful for that. But the original intention was a 25 minute short film that was to be completed over, you know, the summer and the fall while I was in graduate school.
Okay. So tell me a little bit about how long exactly it took you to make this film and what that whole process was, why it took you so long.
Yeah, it's hard to give you an exact number. I mean, I guess I could tell you I started in the summer of 2006. Wow. Yeah. So started in summer 2006. I bought a camera with a refund check for my student loans, and I bought a ticket to LA, rented a car, and drove, you know, between California, Arizona, and Portland, doing interviews that summer. So that was when I started. Now, you know, I worked on the film on and off for in this time, right? So it's hard to give you an exact number, but if we looked at 2006 to technically when it's started, and 2013 when we did the official national premiere and launch, then yeah, 2006, 2007, 2008, 2009, 2010, 2011, 2012. So it's about 7 years.
Wow.
Yeah, way longer than I ever expected. But it's a part of me now, and it's sort of been more than just a film to me. Obviously now it's a movement. It's probably something I'm always going to be talking about in one way or another for the rest of my life, and an issue I'm probably always going to be working on in one way or another.
All right. Who now is your target audience for this project?
Yeah, I guess the original audience I had in mind was Black men. I wanted to make a film for us, right? For the brothers, so that they had something that said, yeah, thank you, that's right. You know what I'm saying? Stop dogging us out with these negative stereotypes and tell another side of the story. So that was the original intent. What I've learned, and I've been really surprised by, is the film, it has meaning for everybody. I mean, it does, right? The core subject is fatherhood. The core subject is family. We all have family, or we all are intended to have family. We all have a familial experience one way or the other, good or bad, right? Mixed or nuclear or traditional or non-traditional, whatever. We all have a familial experience, and we all know men. And we've all had men play different roles in our lives. And so whether or not you had a father, it impacts how you interact with men. That's just a universal thing. So just stepping back from the particular Black experience of fatherhood and looking at just the universal experience of fatherhood, this film touches on a lot of that too, and it has a meaning for a lot of folks. And then the issues that have came out of, the absent father experience, and also the root causes of that experience, are societal issues that we need to address. And so if you're someone who's eligible to vote, you have a stake and you have a say in this too, because there's policies that can impact, how men are interacting at home, right? So I say there's everyone kind of has a stake in it, and I've even been surprised at how broad the audience it's sort of engaged, and how people from all walks of life have come up to me and told me how much it's impacted them, and and wanted to tell me their own story, right? So the original intent was just Black men, and I had no idea that so many people would be inspired by the Black father experience.
What was the most difficult concept to really capture when you were trying to explain, some of these differences?
Good question. One of the reasons it took me so long to make this film was I really struggled with trying to tell this story and not make it seem like I'm just, giving excuses for why Black men aren't in the home at the rates that they should be and could be, with also holding men accountable for their actions, and not coming down on brothers in a negative way, but really actually trying to uplift and inspire them to make the sort of personal changes they need to make in their lives. So that was like really a difficult balance for me, because I wanted to give the historical causes. I wanted to let folks know that this isn't a natural thing for us. There's a root for this, and the root is really racism that is created this trend of so many absent Black fathers. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I didn't want to just give that excuse and say this is what it is. I also wanted to hold men accountable and say, look, each individual has to make their own decisions. We all have our obstacles we have to overcome, and it's never too late to overcome those obstacles, even if it's you haven't talked to or seen your kid in 10 or 15 years. I don't really ever think it's too late. I try to give that, spread that message to everyone. But I almost didn't complete the film because at some point I just said, this is way too sensitive of a topic. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just a guy who wanted to make a movie. I'm not a scholar, right? And I was afraid for how it was going to be received. And so I didn't work on it for a while for that reason, because I didn't know exactly what to do with it. And part of me felt like it just wasn't the movie that I should be making. But for whatever reasons, I kept going. I got back into it and said, I have to make this from my perspective so that people understand this is really just my perspective and my story. And it doesn't necessarily have one particular agenda, one way or the other, but it's really about what's best for our families, what's best for America.
What are the biggest strengths of the video, and what are the key points you try to communicate?
Well, I think it's different for different people. Some people really like the conversation with men on what it means to be a father. For some folks, that's just very enlightening, right? But I think for me personally, and for a lot of Black men, it's the historical piece, in particular the African history part, where it talks about what the family structure looked like in traditional African societies, and how that, it takes a village sort of concept, wasn't just an idea or an ideology. It was an actual way of life. That is the most powerful piece to me, and that's what I hear most folks be so excited about, because that's a part of our history that's just not talked about. We don't know very much about our African history. You have to really dig deep and do your own research to learn about it, because they certainly are not teaching it in most schools. You know what I mean? Yeah. And there's not a whole lot of dialogue around it in the mainstream. And so to have the brother Harry Mars and Dr. Wade Nobles and Dr. Donald Rowe be able to shed some light on what that looked like, that was a breakthrough moment for the film. That was a breakthrough moment. Because up until that point, as far back as I'd gone was slavery. And slavery was important, right? It's sort of where it all came apart for us. But I didn't have anything to lift up as an example to say, look, my people, there's a time and a place where we were there for our kids, and that was our way of life. That was a strong element of who we were, who we are. And to me, it gives some inspiration. It gives something to look to and say, wait, it wasn't always this way. Maybe we can change. Maybe we can get back to a place similar to that.
Yeah, I certainly found that to be the most eye-opening part of your film for me.
Yeah, thank you.
But tell me a little bit about where this film has taken you post-production.
Yeah, well, the film has taken me around the country. I've been, blessed to have folks from, different nonprofit organizations colleges and universities, and then just community folks reach out and say, we heard about your film, we want you to come out and show it in our community. And so a lot of it are folks that I've sort of known through my other work in nonprofit and education, but it's been really interesting to continue to go and show this film, and people have a different response every time. Overwhelmingly the response has been positive, but people's take on the story, on history, is always a little bit different, and how it relates to their particular community is always unique, right? And so with I've been to Ohio and New Jersey and Florida and Illinois and I don't know, some California, of course, and of course here in Portland, to show the film, and all those communities are kind of different in their own way. Yeah. A place like Oakland, you have a lot of folks that know a lot about Black history already. I mean, you have a very racially conscious community there. Of course, because of the history, Black Panthers, all of that. Oakland has that strong Black political orientation. So when I first showed it there, and that's where we sort of did our big premiere, I was nervous because I was like, if anybody's gonna, be able to critique this film, it's gonna be Oakland, because they know their stuff in Oakland. And thankfully, though, I got a pretty good response. But it was probably a little bit more political than some of the other places where I've shown it. And then one of the most sort of compelling places or spaces where I've shown it is to different social worker groups and human service providers. People, largely white women, kind of make up that profession, and but they're working with a lot of Black families, or they're working with a lot of families of color. And so watching this film for them I think that has been really insightful, because they hadn't thought about a lot of this stuff, and they didn't know a lot about the history piece. And so it's been able to change some perceptions of the families that they're working with on the day-to-day basis. And it's pushed them to question how they are engaging the fathers, because largely, social workers, human service providers, they're working with families where men have been the perpetrators of violence, or they're sort of the cause of the problem a lot of times, but that's not always the case. And so one of the things that we have to do with in that field of work is sort of continue to advance how the social workers, human service providers are understanding the family dynamics and approaching and starting relationships with men, not just the women of the family or the household, because a lot of times the men are just ignored. And so I've been able to show this film and kind of open up that conversation with those folks too.
Prior to this film, it wasn't really something that was addressed, but now it's almost become a little bit of a movement. Tell me more about other things that have been going on besides your film in and of itself that have helped talk about this issue that hasn't been talked about.
Yeah, thank you. Well, when I started in 2006, like I said, I would Google search Black fathers, you couldn't find anything. Of course now Google is, their search engine system is probably a little bit more sophisticated, but I couldn't find much. And since then, there's been a burgeoning movement of fatherhood, and also a burgeoning movement for Black male achievement. That's sort of what they're calling it. And folks have really actually started to put some money where their mouth is around this, including Michael Bloomberg, the mayor of New York City, put, you know, a significant amount of his own money into just improving the life outcomes of black males in New York City. And that's powerful. When the mayor of a city does that, I mean, it's not only just the money, but the statement that makes publicly is that he's willing to invest, that black men are actually worth investing in, right? So that was powerful. But then also the Open Society Foundation has an initiative called the Campaign for Black Male Achievement. And they've been able to sort of been a leading voice for foundations and philanthropic sort of initiatives around addressing disparities impacting black men, and in some cases, you know, men of color, black, Latino, Native men. And so that's had a great impact on the work that I'm doing now, because there's all these other things happening too, and people are sort of now part of the conversation, and I'm not just the only one talking about it, but a lot of other people are talking about it. And then of course, President Obama, the Obama administration has also invested significantly in responsible fatherhood programs. So, and particularly also, you know, investing in men who are coming out of being incarcerated, and trying to help them transition back to being productive citizens. And so sort of all these different forces have sort of come together at the right time, and right now is a great time to be talking about this and to plug in with and collaborate with different folks around black fatherhood and black male issues.
And what do you feel like your video, your film is in the whole mix of all of these? Where is your impact at?
So that's a great question. Yeah, where's the Black Fatherhood Project sort of, where does it fit into the whole? Yeah. You know, honestly, still trying to figure that out. I think what we know is that media can be powerful. What we're still learning is how exactly to use it, and how to, you know, use it in a way where it supplements all the other things happening. So you have fatherhood programs, you have mentor programs, you have, you know, different classes and then different just like community groups. Well, the film is just a film, you know. It's not as powerful as 5 or 6 brothers coming together to talk through some of their family issues and trying to lift each other up, right? That's the real work that happens. But the film, I still think, has a place in sparking that conversation, and providing some education, some historical education, some historical context to help explain why we're in this situation that we're in the first place. I think that's one of what's most unique about the film, is that that's where it fits in, is that no other film is out there talking about the history and providing the historical context that the Black Fatherhood Project does. And so I think it's about the you know, historical context, a little bit of inspiration, and a little bit of validation for black men, you know, to feel validated, to feel like we're, you know, we are good dads too. And we certainly have everything that it takes to be good fathers. But we have to address some things within our own communities, but then also some, you know, inequities that exist that make it just harder for men to thrive and to provide for their families and to be, you know, loving, positive, responsible father figures.
Right. Yeah. Now, if I ain't know no better, I could have been sucked right up into the setup. But I kept my head up, and every time I fell, I would get up. See, I ain't need no nines and Berettas. I kill with the lines and the letters, with the verbs and the nouns. Just a kid trying to get his sound heard around. Jump into ciphers and keep the old timers astounded. They said he was the best in his surroundings, cause everyone around him was drowning. And the fair one, no one son could pound him. With the lyrics, you pray you hear it. They say his bad hood couldn't match his good spirit.